Hi, and welcome everyone to the Capital HQ Online Investment Showcase. Today, we've got a very special panel session, something which I've been wanting to do for some time now. The area of immunotherapy has been, as I suppose, come on quite strong over the last sort of decade. And we're fortunate enough to work with several companies that are progressing quite well in this area. And I was speaking to Leslie, and everyone's probably seen the rise of sort of Imugene over the last 7 years, I should say, that I sort of beat. And to me, I thought it's just such an important topic. Obviously what happens when we talk about life science as an area, we can get sort of caught up in sort of terminology and the different trials and the phases and so forth. But this to me is just such an important area that I really want to put more of a spotlight on it for investors that, number one, got an interest in life science, or number two, have got family members that have been impacted, by cancer in some sort of way, because obviously immunotherapy has become one of the most featured areas. And obviously from a patient outcome perspective, it does have the potential to make a significant difference. So to start this off, I just love everyone to give a bit of an introduction to themselves and a little bit of a bio about their company. So I'll start with you and how I see it. So I'll start with you, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Dr. Rebecca McQualter, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer and Acting CEO of Chimeric Therapeutics. And at Chimeric Therapeutics, we're bringing cell therapy to more cancer patients focused on cell therapy and solid tumors. Handing over
to Graham.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having me. So I am the chairman of Sire Therapeutics. We're an immuno-oncology company developing what are called bispecific antibodies for the treatment of prostate cancer. And as well, I'm also the CEO of a company called Immunotherapeutics, which is also developing bispecific antibodies for a range of different indications. And Sire is a spin-out from Immunotherapeutics. My background, I'm an industrial chemist with a PhD in chemistry, and I've spent a lot of time helping to build and manage companies as well as raising funds for those companies.
And in life science, that's always required, Graham.
Yeah, absolutely.
Over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Steve. My name's Ian Nisbet. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at CapitalHQ. At CapitalHQ, we're developing the next generation of cellular immunotherapies. So we have a stem cell-based platform where we're able to very precisely genetically engineer the stem cells and then convert those cells into different types of functional immune cells with a primary focus initially on natural killer or NK cells.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Leslie.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. My name is Leslie Chung, and I'm the MD and CEO of Imugene. I have been with the company for over 9 years, and we've seen a myriad of various different immuno-oncology therapies. And currently, we're quite focused on a specific blood cancers with our allogeneic CAR T, as well as a friendly virus, unlike COVID, an oncolytic virus that fights off your solid tumors by replicating only in malignant and solid tumors. So I'm happy to report that all of our products are in the clinic, and all of our platform has at least, more than complete response. And then some of those patients are living 3.5 years out in remission.
Wow. As this is what got me really excited about it as well. And we'll deep dive into this as we go through the different questions. But just as a sort of starting statement for anyone that's sort of new to this area or new to life science or want to understand, immunotherapy represents basically a paradigm shift in cancer treatment. Unlike traditional therapies, it directly targets the cancer cells, and the immunotherapy harnesses the body's own immune system to actually fight cancer. And that was I suppose, which really sort of appealed to me from an approach. So, and what's important is it has the potential, as Leslie just sort of highlighted, to have longer lasting effects and can potentially work against multiple types of cancers, which you'll see as we go through in the different questions. Now, Graham, as a starting point, can you explain how immunotherapy treatment differs from traditional cancer treatments in terms of, patient outcomes and also side effects?
Thanks, Steve. So if you look at traditional treatments and tradition changes over over periods of time, particularly when it comes to cancer, because it's such a rapidly evolving field. But you could basically say there are three major traditional treatments out there. If it's a solid tumor, that would include surgery. Then you have radiation therapy and also drug therapies, which would be cytotoxic drugs and even hormonal types of drugs. One must remember that in a tumor or cancer patient, it's these cancer cells which are reproducing at a far higher rate than healthy cells. So when one uses cytotoxic agents or radiation therapy, you're trying to hit those cancer cells without actually trying to affect the natural cells or the healthy cells, and that's a bit of a problem. So what one typically gets then are some nasty side effects. So rapidly evolving cells which are still healthy, such as hair follicle cells, could be the first ones to be hit as a side effect because you're trying to hit cancer cells as well, which are rapidly evolving. So those are some of the problems that one has with these traditional treatments. And of course, surgery comes with its own complications. So immunotherapeutics, as you eloquently put it there, seeks to destroy the cancer cells by assisting the body's immune system to kill them. And naturally, that would avoid killing healthy cells. But cancer cells can be very, very tricky, and they can become immune to immunotherapeutic treatments or regimens. So the trick in the field of immunotherapy is to identify a biochemical pathway that is robust to any changes that the cell may try and impart to develop immunity. And that is the challenge that faces most immunotherapeutic products out there. But immunotherapeutics, with our increased understanding of how the immune system works, how genomics works, proteomics, is a very fast-growing field now, which will rapidly overtake these traditional treatments, rather.
Thanks, Graham. And I suppose that moves on to you, Ian, just given the approach that you guys are taking. Like, what are some of the most significant therapeutic breakthroughs in immunotherapy, that you feel have the potential to, I suppose, revolutionize that patient care aspect, given all those sort of factors that Graham was highlighting?
Yeah, so I think immunotherapy, and just to, I guess, provide a bit of a context on the general term. So, immunotherapy is basically using the immune system or manipulating the immune system to treat the disease. And, the concept of immunotherapy has been around for a long time. So people have played around with cancer vaccines for decades, trying to induce immune responses against cancers. And, sometimes it's worked, sometimes it has, well, most times it hasn't. I guess the big change in the last decade has been the advent of checkpoint inhibitors. So this is a field that didn't exist 15 years ago, and basically came out of the work of Jim Allison at MD Anderson Center, where he discovered checkpoints, things that actually block the function of T cells, of immune cells. And he was able to demonstrate that if you can inhibit those checkpoints, you can actually activate the cells. And so that's caused a huge change in the way that cancer has been treated for a number of different solid tumors. And the main product there, Keytruda, it is the largest selling drug. So last year it sold $25 billion in sales. That's a drug that didn't exist 10 years ago. So just a dramatic change in the thinking in the field, and demonstrating that by being able to manipulate the immune system, you can have profound impacts upon cancer. Our view at CapitalHQ is, the next big innovation in the field is cellular immunotherapies, where you're actually adding the immune cells back to the patients, because one of the problems with existing immunotherapies, things like checkpoint inhibitors, is you're relying on the patient's own immune cells to be activated. And sometimes, elderly patients, they don't have very good immune systems, or they've been knocked around with chemotherapy, and so the immune cell counts are down. And so you actually can't activate the existing immune cells very well because there aren't so many of them there, or they're not too healthy. And so what we're doing is adding in lots and lots of those very active immune cells into the patient. So in our view, that's the big new area opening up in the field of immunotherapy. So in particular, cellular immunotherapy.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ian. And, just on your side, Rebecca, Chimeric is taking a sort of different approach. Do you internally, do you feel that, immunotherapy has the potential to cure cancer or just improve the actual patient outcomes?
Well, it has the potential for both. I think from what we've seen for CAR T cells in the past 10 years, the first patient who was treated with CAR T still doesn't have any signs of cancer. So I think you can safely say that she might be on a path to a cure. But we also have to acknowledge the really small wins. So if we take a rare disease with a high unmet need, if we get a few more months for that patient with a cellular immunotherapy, we're going to take it, because you can't put a price on somebody's time here.
Oh, exactly what Leslie said, with like an additional 3 years in some of their trials.
And even if it's months, we'll take that. So I think
correct.
At Chimeric Therapeutics, we're addressing a couple of nasty ones, so glioblastoma, gastric cancer, and pancreatic cancer for our new one coming through. So if, particularly for pancreatic cancer, it's a really quick, slippery slope. So if we can hasten that slope, that's a really good outcome.
Fantastic. And Leslie, for you, what are the different approaches to immunotherapy, and how do they differ in terms of, I suppose, how you approach them? Obviously, you said you've got 4 different trials going on, and then ultimately the patient outcomes.
So there are so many different immunotherapies. Ian mentioned the checkpoint inhibitors that came to rise roughly about 15 years ago, and then CAR Ts roughly about 11 years ago. These are when all those were, starting to get approval, and it formed a pillar of cancer therapeutics, which is this whole idea that awakening or unleashing your immune system can now rapidly go after your tumor where there wasn't before. So there are myriads of various different ways, and we're still learning the various different ways that we can untap your immune system via cancer vaccines, via CAR Ts or checkpoint inhibitors. I think we still need to refine those and continue our journey of making those better, because it's great that we can give a few weeks to life, few months to life, but I think we're all wanting that precious thing, which is to cure cancer at the end of the day, or certain kinds of cancer. So I think it's wonderful that immune systems are still just currently being untapped, and we're learning every day with our products. So at Imugene, we have a CAR T formulation that's after a very late stage lymphoma. We also have lots of solid tumor activity with our oncolytic viruses, and as well as our cancer vaccine. But it's just, I think it's wonderful to have these novel approaches and see activity. But I think the whole holy grail is to really get that remission to last longer than a few precious months.
Completely agree. And Graham, from a market perspective, everyone sort of highlighted that this area is not new, but it obviously has had a bit more of a spotlight over the last sort of 5 to 10 years. And Leslie mentioned some of the sort of the key milestones. How do you foresee the market for immunotherapy, or even the technology in general, evolving over the next sort of 5 to 10 years? And what are the key factors that are driving this?
Well, I think many instances of market growth, one can simply go back to some of the basic economics. As you've pointed out, many individuals, families will be touched by someone who has had cancer. And the prevalence or the incidence, no matter which one you choose, will be increasing with an aging population. We've had successes with, as has been pointed out, with checkpoint inhibitors and other antibody approaches. But despite, for example, as Ian said, Keytruda coming up with $25 million in revenue, I think there is a broad agreement that these checkpoint inhibitors and some of the CAR T therapies, well, A, they're very expensive, but B, have not been as successful as one would like. We don't want, while every week and every month is precious, ultimately we want to try and get to a cure. So the science is developing quite rapidly. So, for example, here at SIRE, we're looking at something called bispecific antibodies, and this is specific for prostate cancer. So bispecific, one part of the antibody binds to the protein on the surface the tumor cell, and another one binds to the T cell, and they brings it in together, and then the T cell kills the tumor cell. And we're targeting a specific antigen, and many of you and many of your viewers will be familiar with PSA tests for prostate cancer, which is prostate-specific antigen, but no one has been able to actually target that for the treatment of prostate cancer, and that's what we're able to do, or what we are developing rather. So our bispecific antibody will target the PSA, the prostate-specific antigen, and that allows us to attack the tumor right at its source, inside the prostate gland. So it's these sorts of developments and processes which will drive the actual demand side as well for the treatment of cancer. And I think one also needs to take into account some of the later developments that we are seeing with artificial intelligence and machine learning, because these are playing a huge role now in the ability to better understand the basic genomic factors, the proteomics, and the chemical structure, relationships, and processes. And that will push, again, another round of drug development in the immunotherapy market, as we understand these processes a lot better and we're able to clarify what is going on.
Thanks, Graham. And Ian, from an investor's perspective, so let's say someone's looking at immunotherapy for the first time, or even if they've sort of been following it, following sort of life science from an area, they've heard, immunotherapy sort of mentioned a few times, and now they want to understand, what are the actual sort of financial returns that can be, that can be realized if a venture is successful, going through their trials. Now, I asked that question noting that, life science is a high risk area, but there is a significant sort of market reward when done well. So it'd be good to understand your perspective on that.
Sure. So I'm not going to talk about specific companies. I'll just answer that in terms of thinking about an area of oncology. So I've had the good fortune to be in the field for more than 20 years, and so seen a lot of developments over that period of time. When I started off in oncology, I was working in the States, and the first approved drug I worked on was a drug called Velcade. When we launched that drug in multiple myeloma, the market for multiple myeloma was less than $1 billion a year, the worldwide market. There was a report came out the other day projecting the market for multiple myeloma drugs at 2030 will be $33 billion. So that's 33-fold increase in the course of about 20 years. And that's what happens when you get new types of therapies coming in. So we did it with Velcade back in 2003. But since then, there's been a consistent development of new drugs that treat multiple myeloma, ranging from antibodies targeting specific cell markers. We've now seen the approval of BCMA targeted CAR T cells. We're seeing antibody drug conjugates and so on. And so that market will continue to grow. And so there's been just a huge amount of value in the market developed over that relatively short period of time. And the companies that have led that charge, we've seen dramatically increases in their value as well. And importantly, what we've seen in that that short space of 20 years, the life expectancy of a patient with multiple myeloma has increased from back in 2003, it was less than 4 years. Today, it's probably 15 years or more. And that's the sort of impact you can see upon patient outcomes, but also in terms of the value of the market and therefore the value of the companies developing these drugs. So I'm not going to predict any particular increase in value for any of our companies, CapitalHQ or anyone else, but just to say that we're all part of the next generation of products, and some of us will be successful, and we can reasonably expect to see those sorts of increases in value driven by that success.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ian. And for you, Rebecca, how do you assess the commercial potential of new immunotherapy treatments, and what factors do you see contribute to their success in the market?
So I'm really glad you asked me this question, because I'm going through this process right now, being fresh in the seat at Chimeric Therapeutics. I think there's a few different things that we take into consideration. So the first thing is the unmet need, and I think that's really important to establish. Now, even if it's a small number of patients, it's not generally the number, but it's available treatments and the market size. So even if you have a small number of patients, the market size can still be quite big in terms of dollar value. And then we also look at the pathway to market. So how quickly we can get it into market, what's our return on massive investment for clinical trials going to be? And then the final piece will be how quickly can we expand the market? So that's really important. So for example, with a CAR T therapy, most big oncology centers around the world know how to handle that now. It's been 10 years in the making. They've got experience, they've got educated teams. It's not a new sort of thing. So particularly for CAR T, that's really exciting. I think another thing that I would look at is the horizon. What's coming? Are we going to be superseded quickly? And with some amazing cancer vaccines on the horizon, that's where I'm focused at the moment. But that's kind of the small package in a 5-second blip of what we do when we look at potential market potential for any molecule coming through.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rebecca. And Leslie, you're obviously with Imugene. I'll ask you specific to Imugene. You're obviously taking a portfolio approach to it. So from an investment standpoint, how do from a CEO standpoint, how do you think about the creation of value in Imugene with your 4 different approaches, and as you go through your different trials, and why have you chosen that path?
So I want to address what Ian said. He said some of us are going to be successful. I really want all of us to be successful. I think we're all doing incredible, novel work, and I think it also, success builds on success. I hope for everyone on this panel to be successful, because we need to get Australian biotech companies really out there we're doing some revolutionary things here. At Imugene, back to Imugene, we have a product that could possibly change the landscape of how we look at solid tumors. So, the value creation and excitement for me personally is to have this experienced team to take a product all the way from bench and hopefully to bedside. And in between there may be partnering, there may be cooperative groups and collaborations. And that's really exciting when someone else gets as excited about your product as you do. And so with our 4 products, I can't be more exuberantly happy for how we're developing these products. And we have a team effort here, and we're all joined at the hips in terms of understanding where our products can reside. So I do a full mapping of every single product that we have in our portfolio all the way to marketing to see where it will end up. But the story has to be quite tight and concise, because the regulatory journey isn't easy. And so understanding where this drug fits in the landscape, where it could possibly end up, how it can be combined or by itself, all those things adds to the value of the drug. And in essence, if you add value to drug, and patients being our North Star, at the end of the day, if we can serve a body of patients, the value will come. And that has been my belief from the dawn of starting this very long career, 26 years now, in drug development, specifically in cancer.
And just give the audience some sort of perspective. And there's one thing I suppose I should have done beforehand. What is the actual size of the cancer treatment market in general?
Oh gosh, I mean, even if you just look at CAR T alone, just CD19 CAR Ts alone, in 2023 they became a blockbuster drug, and there was only one for an extended amount of time, and then others joined. And I'm only talking about the CD19. I think BCMA is going to just surpass that as clinicians and oncologists learn how to treat with the drug. There's more use of it because they learn. So that's $23 billion just last year alone. And in 10 years, they think that that's going to balloon to $23 billion. And that's, again, only 4 drugs, only 4 CAR Ts, and there are so many others. So the market is completely untapped in that That's only 10% of the population, and that's blood cancers. We've got 90% of solid tumor that hasn't been well served. Keytruda did a wonderful job, and checkpoint inhibitors in general have done a wonderful job in various different combinations, but they really only serve roughly about 20-30% in certain kinds of indication. And they're, as we say, they're in the $25 billion cells. That's one drug in the checkpoint inhibitor space that's serving either lung or bladder, very, very small populations, in fact, but that becomes a standard of care, and then more and more is being used. So the valuation can be, and the market size is huge. If you can really affect patient and lead to more than a few months, maybe hopefully lead to a cure, then the market is still very much untapped.
So really, it's a multi-$100 billion market, per year, from an opportunity perspective.
But even earlier on, those partnerships, bringing value to shareholders, all the while the journey is going. I mean, that's what we're looking at here on the ASX.
Got it. And I'll target something very specific to you, Graham. You mentioned just beforehand that you're targeting immunotherapies for prostate cancer. So I suppose from a opportunity perspective, why are you targeting this area? And provide us with sort of, I suppose, the way in which you think about the risk versus reward potential by targeting specifically prostate cancer.
Well, the markets are, as Leslie said, are quite huge, and it's very difficult to try and work out which one you should actually go for. But when we looked at the issues facing different types of cancers, of course, from a market opportunity, you would look at the one that has, to a very large degree, the largest unmet need there. And if you look at prostate cancer, the opportunities of the treatment modalities are pretty limited. You're looking firstly, potentially at surgery. You could be looking at radiation therapy. You could be looking at hormonal therapy. Only recently have we seen some drugs and vaccines being produced, but these are for specific cases of prostate cancer. And we looked at this and we said, well, hold on, we've got a good marker for this, which is prostate-specific antigen. Why can't we leverage something off that? And it's actually looking at the basic cancer cell. That's what led us down this path. So an unmet need, quite clear. Nearly 2/3 of all men will develop prostate cancer. Many of them won't require treatment, but it is a very large unmet need. And also when it comes to the side effects, radiation therapy, hormone replacement therapy, these can have material side effects and also have a very, very negative effect on a person's quality of life. So it's not just the actual direct, life and death impact.
And it's also not just during treatment as well. It's also can be ongoing for months after.
Well, not only months. These quality of life issues can be with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, wow.
So it is a market with an extremely high unmet need, and there aren't many formal drugs specifically for it available on the market. So that was one of the reasons why we went into it. And
Ian, just from a benefits perspective, obviously we've talked about the sort of prolonging of life. We've talked about the improvement of the sort of patient outcomes and their just general sort of lifestyle post some sort of treatment. What are the broader sort of economic benefits? Can the success of immunotherapy treatments bring just to the healthcare sector in general?
Well, I think there are benefits to to patients in terms of better safety profiles. There is a general benefit to the community in terms of patient outcomes, economic benefit there. I think there's also, particularly again, talking about cellular immunotherapies, which is where we're focused at CapitalHQ, we're at the start of the journey with cellular therapies, and we're still working out how to use them in cancer. But we're increasingly seeing companies that have a cellular therapy platform go into non-cancer diseases. So there's been some interesting results in autoimmune diseases, and there's a whole range of other diseases as well that these could potentially play out. So I think the benefit downstream will hopefully be in the shorter term with improved quality of life, improved treatment of cancer patients, benefit to the overall community in that regard. But then as we understand more and more how to use these sorts of treatments, there'll be spin-off benefits into other indications as well. So again, in our view, we're at the start of the next generation of treatments for a whole range of different human diseases.
And that, I suppose, brings to my next question, and thanks for that, Ian, brings to my next question for Rebecca, is how is immunotherapies actually being integrated into the actual healthcare systems at the moment? At what stage are people, like how has it been implemented? Someone gave me the example the other day that effectively they were being given immunotherapy treatment after radiation therapy, for example. Like how is it currently being integrated? What sort of trialing are they having at different stages of integrating it, and what could it have on what are the impacts they could have on sort of later market adoption?
So currently in Australia, you have to fail a couple of nasty chemotherapies in order to get to immunotherapy. And that's a design by the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme that I know all the big pharmas are working really hard to change. But for us at Chimeric, and I know for a lot of other companies here, we're actually trialing most of our products after only one round of chemotherapy. And what we see is that the immune system tends to respond a lot better if it's not tired from all the consistent chemotherapy. And so the cells seem to be happier, they glow under the microscope, and we can engineer them really quite easily. But in terms of the healthcare system, there's a fair bit of work to do. And I think an analogy that might resonate with some of your viewers is with electric cars. So in Australia, it's pretty hard to have an electric car if you want to drive from Melbourne to Bendigo. You might have to stop at a petrol station and plug into the wall. There's no fast charging ports along the way. But in California, for example, you can drive from LA to San Francisco and there's charging ports all the way up because there's been that investment, and then there's been a significant demand for that particular product over there. So if we take that back to personalized medicine and CAR T therapy, once we see more people adopting it at first line or second line, so that's the first point of treatment or the second part of treatment, we'll see more personalized medicine being available. So we'll be able to take your cells, run a genome sequence. You can have one of Leslie's fancy vaccines. You can have one of my CAR Ts, and you will be right to go. And that's where I see the future of personalized medicine heading for our healthcare system. But again, this is going to take a lot of investment from all of us.
And what is to stop them actually trialing it, or sort of, I suppose, integrating it before the first session of radiation?
So the main focus for the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme in Australia is budget reduction, unfortunately. And also the chemotherapy drugs that have been used for 30, 40, 50 years, we know how they work. We know how patients respond. We've seen multiple responses. And so whilst I wouldn't say that CAR T is necessarily new, all of the molecules that we're bringing to market are technically new. So people want to understand a little bit more and feel more comfortable about how each different person's body is going to react to them. But we'd really like to see a place where patients can come to the hospital and have the best care first up.
That makes logical sense to me. And Leslie, you mentioned we got 4 different programs that are going through various stages of clinical trial. So just for, I suppose, to help investors when they're looking at immunotherapy companies, can you share just some insights into the critical success factors, for advancing the different range of treatments as they go through the clinical development stages?
It's quite simple, but quite complicated at the same time. I mean, I think the clinical trial aspect and clinical development generally encompasses phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. But now I think we're being smarter and faster. And unfortunately, the FDA and other regulatory bodies do put constraints on what line of care that we can provide to patients. So even if we think that our products could work better in the front line or in the first instances when they're diagnosed or newly diagnosed, which is, great, we still have to abide by the ethics rules and regulatory bodies to say you have to honor the standard of care. It's actually unethical for any oncologist to treat any patients on what's considered an investigational drug, as Rebecca laid out. Those are non-approved drugs. They're still in clinical trials. It's unethical to move them in a frontline setting or a second line setting. They have to exceed, unfortunately, the standard of care. And the standard of care happens to be the old mainstays, the chemo, the radiation, etc. I think, if I like companies that have very experienced team, have a record of having had experience with developing a certain kind of medicine, and in this case, in oncology. You also want to see that sometimes phase 1 is great for safety rollouts, but also this is when you get to look at how the drug works. And so when you start seeing activity along with safety, you've got something very special. And I think almost companies owe it to themselves to develop those products. And I'm fortunate at Imugene, we have 4 products that have exceeded phase 1 or exceeded safety profile and have seen efficacy as early as phase 1. So in CAR-Ts especially, because it has shown such a whopping response rates, they are able to move into phase 2 or 3 and get rapidly approved. And so the FDA and the regulatory bodies are finally seeing that really efficacious drug, or if you get responses early on with safety intact, they're willing to listen to you to give you fast track designation, orphan designation, et cetera. Because like all regulatory bodies, they're all humans and they want drugs to be out there for our patients. And I think they're willing to look at novel therapies as long as you have safety and you have a clear sign of some level of response and efficacy. And they will listen to you in terms of moving that faster into market. And we look at that setting all the time here at Imugene because we want to produce drugs faster for patients in need.
Perfect. Thanks, Leslie. And just a final question for you all as we sort of come to wrap up the panel session. So you've all got extensive experience in life science in general and in this space. What are, like I said, if you were to put on your investor hat, obviously you're passionate CEOs and COOs, but if you were to put on your investor hat, what are the future trends in immunotherapy that investors should be looking for? And how can they position themselves to capitalize on these trends? And understanding, this is from a long-term perspective. This is a 5 to 10 year horizon perspective, not how can they make a trade in the next 3 months. So I'll start, I'll go around and ask you all that question. So I'll start with you, Rebecca.
Oh, sure. I think future trends in immunotherapy, please don't be afraid of investing in CAR-T. I think there's a lot of growth to happen in cell therapy and particularly in cellular immunotherapy, even though it looks daunting and expensive. As I mentioned, the cost will come down as more people start to use it and it becomes a mainstay in the treatment of care. So I think in the future, we're looking at lots of different multiple targets. So you can attach different CARs and have 2 or 3 CARs on one cell, which I think is really exciting from a scientific perspective. So I'll be looking out for those in particular.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rebecca. Ian.
So I just reiterate one of the points I made before, and that is, we're at the start of the development of cellular immunotherapies and other immunotherapies as well. But, my area, Therapeutic, is cellular. We're at the start of this new area. What I think people should look out for is the opportunity to exploit cells to make them more like pharmaceutical products. So at the moment, the existing autologous CAR-T products it's one product for one patient. So looking at ways in which you can make one product for multiple patients, which is what we're doing with our stem cell-based technology. And then again, to reiterate another point, look for opportunities for driving the technology into other areas. So we're all focused on oncology, and quite rightly, it's a huge area of patient need and huge potential returns, but the ability to, again, manipulate the immune system to treat other diseases. So I think look for technology platforms that can go into other areas as well. And it has the potential to be just a huge change in the way that a whole range of different diseases are treated.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ian. And yourself, Graham?
Well, echoing a lot of the points that have come across from the other panelists, but I think another way of looking at it is, I was at a major conference in Europe a little while ago, and part of a CEO forum just discussing issues in the sector. And one of the things that really stood out for me was cost of therapies, cost and capacity. So forgetting about all the science and all the advances that are made in that regard, this was a major issue for a lot of the major biotech players in the life sciences sector. Cost of therapies, ability to produce cheaply. So any company that is able to take a technology and translate it into a manufacturing process which is not too difficult, or can slot in with current manufacturing processes, or those where they need minor adjustments, and of course it has to work, will have a major role to play.
Fantastic. And lastly, you, Leslie?
So, it's interesting because I only invest in biotech because I feel like that's what I know. And so I think this is a particular relevance to me. Having been at large pharma companies looking at small biotech companies to buy, I feel like I've got a very unique perspective on what is investable and what's not. And for me, what I would look for in particular is those companies that are doing something novel. Not necessarily just a me too. And sure, I'd love to be a weight loss. I'd like to be Ozempic, part 4, because those companies are just thriving. And that's great. Lifestyle medicine's great. But I really do believe that the world needs better cancer medication. And I applaud everyone on this panel for trying to help. All of us are trying to help solve this great puzzle that's cancer. But I think, if you have a good team, if you understand what you're doing, experience, I can't tout that enough. And taking a product through all the way to either registration or even partnering is not easy. It's a quite complicated path. There are trends that happen. There are cost affiliation, and there are just people that just like it for whatever reason. So I think I would look for novel products that has safety profiles that are showing signs of efficacy early on, and especially in monotherapy, not just in combination. And I love gene editing, and I think that's why we're, Rebecca and all of us are in cellular therapeutics, because we think that can be advanced even further than what it is now. And I hear everything that everybody on this panel resonates with me in that cellular therapy is the new frontier. Gene editing and all those are still untapped. Oncolytic viruses to cancer vaccines to radiotheranostics. So there's several different approaches to cancer therapeutics, and I think all of us have a very unique path and also a responsibility to carry this forward. And investments are great to help us further that, and we hope to give value back to all the stakeholders.
Very well summarized, Leslie, as always. I'll just go finish, and I'll try and explain the most simplest way possible when I think about everything that you guys are doing. I love innovation, right? And I love it for a number of different things. And I think someone said it before that the chemotherapy or the radiation therapy is a 30 to 50-year-old sort of treatment that's been going for a long time. the beautiful thing about innovation is, first, what it does is it typically replaces the value of the incumbent. So if you think about I'm going to a completely different area. If you think about classifieds as ads as an example, but absolutely, that were previously in newspapers, it got destroyed by the internet, right? And then the value of those companies have then 10x'd, the value of those incumbents that were there at that stage. And then likewise, AI has the potential to do the same on the software side, to go and 10x that again over the next sort of 5 to 10 years. So the easiest way, I think, for me to summarize when I think about you guys is the current incumbent treatment is the chemotherapy and the radiation. Immunotherapy is that sort of new player coming into the market, and because it is in that tricky area of life science, and it does have different bureaucratic and safety processes to go through, it does take a bit longer than normal. But ultimately, the potential value for your companies is to, as I said, first replace the value of the incumbent treatments, and then exponentially go beyond it. As far as more and more investment actually goes into the space. And the most beautiful thing I've seen about life science is typically when people have successes in life science, they tend to recycle that money back into new treatments as well. So the success of all of you, is important for the consistent building of the ecosystem. And then likewise, the role that high net worths and family offices can play is super important, especially in the early stages, but also, even in for listed companies, because, small trades can move share prices quite quickly, for listed companies. So I would like to say a big thank you to all of you. I appreciate taking the time out of the middle of the day to do this and sort of provide a lot more, in-depth sort of understanding of immunotherapy as an area. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
It was wonderful. Thank you.